STEM itself is just something passionate about because I love problem solving. I think problem solving applies everywhere, but I feel like the best medium for problem solving is STEM. I guess one of the biggest lessons is time management. There are definitely better ways of, doing it in time instead of staying up to like 2 a.m. in the morning. Understanding, how you can be a lot more productive with your time. It's like gaining that freedom, saying, hey, I have this time, but I know I can use it well, so what can I do with this other time right here? And it kind of builds on top of it.
What advice would you give to our aspiring TJ students and who are now at TJ, kind of like your brother Ishan?
The advice I'd give all these students, and especially Ishan, listen to your parents.
Hi, I'm Krishna and welcome to Learning by Design podcast. I'm joined by my guest co-host, Kyla Pizana. Yeah, and today we have a very special guest, Kunal Saxena, who has been an integral part of Young Scholars Circle or the Masterpiece Academy. And now he's here to share his inspiring story with us. So for yours, as a background, Kunal was our student way back when he was in elementary school. And he did test preparation with us when he applied for Johns Hopkins school and college aptitude test, Iowa algebra aptitude test, all the way to TJ. Okay, now you're going to hear straight from him because I know we have a lot of students who wanted to ask some TJ alumnus and some TJ alumni, and he is one of those alumnus, he and his student. Okay, so let's dive in. Okay, so let's dive in, and this is Kunal Saxena.
Hi, pleasure to be here. My name is Kunal, as Ms. Carr put. It's great to be here with Ms. Carr and Kyla as well. I am, as Ms. Carr mentioned, I was a TJ alumni, and I was there from 2018 to 2022. But before that, I was a Young Scholars student, and I was here since I took my SCAT, which is almost third grade, fourth grade, and I've been involved, until high school, and it's been a magical experience then, and I'm glad to be back, teaching.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Kunal. I really appreciate your effort. Just he flew from college just to be with us and to have this video podcast and in preparation for the ribbon cutting. So Kunal, your story is not only inspiring but also a testament to the power of mentorship, resilience, and hard work. We're excited to dive into your experiences and reflection and share them to our listeners. So let's do segment 1, the early years, building the foundation. Let's start at the beginning. Can you take us back to your first day at Young Scholars Circle?
Yeah, so first day at Young Scholars Circle was the first day that I remember. I've been here for so long. But it was with Dr. Scribner. And this was the office that was right across Tyson's Corner, the Tyson's Tube Mall. And it was a writing intensive class. Now, at first, I felt like, oh, it's a math student. I'm a science student. I get all this stuff. Why do I need a writing course? And my mom and dad eventually pushed me like, let's do this. Let's see what's up. And I think through that and through Dr. Scribner, I kind of understood that now it's a skill that I understand I need like to this day every single day. Right. But I think you understand how important writing is and how important is communicating writing as well. Because, you think, oh, so, I understand math, I understand science, and I can, do all this. I can perform an experiment, I understand what's going on, or I can do some calculation, I can do some proof. It doesn't help if you can't explain to the next person what you can do.
Right.
It's like teaching, right? They say, if you can't explain it to somebody else, you probably don't understand how it works yourself. And it's almost the same thing. And that's a big part of it as well. And so that's kind of where I kind of realized, oh, there is another element to like understanding like STEM. And it's this writing part right here. Mm-hmm. And this kind of translates through where, the skills that you learn from this class about how to write intensively, how to write precisely, how to write, in a way that the reader will understand. Mm-hmm. That actually applies, to TJ, like first year TJ, because the first thing that we did in our iBest, which is now called iBest, it was to write a paper. Right. It was to write a research paper. And in that one, you had, even though you carried out your experiment, you had all your methodology laid out, probably 70% of the time was saying, all right, did you write it this way? Did you use the correct unit? Did you have the right number of paragraphs? Does your abstract expressly say, this is what our project is and this is how it works? Does our introduction give like a good concise, I guess, story of what is the motivation behind your research project? So that's where it kind of comes into this is where I learned from Young Scholars Circle, and just what may not, and it's just something that carries on throughout. And last year too, it was a mentorship I did last year, senior year. So same thing too. Nice. It was a much bigger paper, and it was a lot more work on me because it was just me instead of 4 of us.
Also, even in college, huh?
So this was last year. This was last year TJ. But in college too.
The last year in TJ, like the senior research.
And college, all you're doing is writing. Right. And I remember there was a big math paper about p-adic numbers that I wrote for a class that I had, but for that one also it was just understanding. Oh, this is how latex works. So it's skills beyond just like. So it was just skills beyond understanding. Oh, this is how to write, but there are also ways you can write to communicate it better. So times you obviously heard about Times New Roman, double space, font size 12, but also latex. Can you represent equations in the right way? Can you
the math problem solving essay? Yes,
exactly, right. So can you express equations in the right way? Can you create diagrams and express them in the right way where it's not like a PowerPoint presentation you put on. It's actually something that you created by yourself.
Right.
And those skills are something that I learned through that class too, and just kind of keeps growing on. So that's kind of where the story with Young Scholars Circle started, where it's a small class that I took in 5th grade, which I didn't think as much of, and now I think about it, it's like, wow, it's probably applied to every other point in my life.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you can see now the value of it and how you're applying it. Thank you so much. So what drew you to STEM? Let's go back because, I remembered when we were in 8200 Greensboro Drive, I remember telling your dad that, one of our math teacher saw your giftedness in math. And then I remember telling your dad, Mr. Saxena, your son is gifted and I would love to take him to, do a test prep on SCAT for Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth. So go back to that years. What drew you to STEM and what did those early experience shape your academic growth?
So STEM itself is just something passionate about because I love problem solving. And I think problem solving applies everywhere, but I feel like the best medium for problem solving is STEM. Mostly just because, it's the way it's like the most biggest thing in the world. And in the sense that, like of all the big fields right now with AI, machine learning, and I guess even biotechnology, and those are the 3 biggest fields right now, and they all require problem solving in varying degrees, and that's always something that always enticed me from a young age. And for me, before I even got to like all those big fields, it was coding. Yeah. I just loved, even before that, actually, I'd say it was probably math. Yes. So I loved math. Like I loved everything because it just made sense.
It's easy because the solution's there.
Yeah.
And you can get to the solution.
And then your mom talked about, your grandfather is a math professor. So I can see the DNA.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, it was just less writing.
In your DNA.
It was just less writing. And so it's like, 2 plus 2 is 5, or 4. Well,
precise.
2 plus 2 is 4. And I don't have to write a paragraph explaining why it's 4. Yeah. I mean, and then you realize later on you're absolutely wrong. You have to write something about that. But it just blew up from there. And I think the more math I did, the more I realized how complex it can be. So a big thing was Kumon. So for everyone there, if you know what Kumon is, I know there was a tingle went up your spine for any student there. So, but I did Kumon for a long time now. That was almost 2nd grade when I started. And I just grew my love for math there because it was just constant repetition. But it was like, oh, I understand it. Because for that one, it's just constant practice where you build your confidence by yourself to the point where, you feel you don't realize it, but it's like, I'm doing calculus in 4th grade. Right. And it's, and it's things like that where it kind of build on it and you kind of realize, how far you've gone, but just because you constant repetition and, just forcing yourself to do it. And I think there's something beautiful about that.
Yeah.
And I think also the other thing, and that's the other thing about math, is that, it's something that where if you're very motivated and you want to do more with it, you can absolutely go the distance with it.
Right.
And there's not really much of a wait time, I
Yeah.
guess. That's what I found. And so I got into math. And then naturally, because my parents were computer scientists, I was like, oh, this coding thing sounds fun. Let me try it out. And, I started with Java. Because they were big. They were
13 years old. I think you got the license.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
So
Wow, talk
That's
about it.
awesome.
so for that one, that was interesting.
I remember your
experience.
dad.
So that was a very interesting experience because it was seventh. So I knew some Java, and my mom urged me that, hey, let's try certification, right? Let's see how good
Yeah.
you are. And so I took a summer of seventh grade. Yeah, I took a summer of seventh grade, and I'm actually the first time I did not do well whatsoever. I didn't get
The
it.
first time.
Yep. And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, like maybe I'm good, maybe I'm not certification good, right? My mom kind of pushed me like, no, you can do this. Come on. So, that was
Good mom.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She'll push you when you don't realize you need it. That's what I've learned. But I've with her, and she kind of pushed me, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try doing this again. And I tried to think, what if I can take it January of 8th grade? So this was the January 2018. Yep. And I got an 86 on it. Right. So
Wow.
first time I got a 50, second time I got 86, and the passing grade is 65.
Right.
Right.
It's awesome. I
So-
was like the youngest one.
But I think the biggest thing about that, just that experience, was that it kind of pushed me to saying that, hey, if you put your mind to it and you just learn from your mistakes, you can do anything.
Perfect.
And that not every single milestone that you have has to be one step forward. Sometimes going backwards and kind of understanding what you did wrong can make a bigger step forward than what
Right.
you usually thought. I think, and because of that, because I failed the first time, and I passed the first time, I probably would not have taken as much heart to concepts like polymorphism, and which is a special programming concept that always just kind of confused me. And going to that exam, I understand the syntactically how it worked,
Right.
but never to the point where it's like, oh, I can probably explain to you what it is. But because I failed the exam, I was like, all right, I have to understand everything about this because I don't want to do this again. And so it forced me to understand more and more and more about the language itself.
Right.
And I think that was the beauty of it, because the more I understood, the more I realized how it connected and understood it to a better meaning that I probably would have if I
Practical
passed the first time. If I passed the first time, I probably don't go through that process of understanding it, and I probably end up becoming more confused when it comes to use later. So things like that, those are like the small things where coding kind of gave me kind of an avenue or an outlet where I can, kind of talk about it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, let's do segment 2.
All right.
Let's talk about your TJ experience, research, growth, and resilience. Moving on to TJ, one of the most competitive and prestigious STEM schools in the country. What was your initial experience like when you started there?
Oh, not good.
Oh.
No, so I took a summer course first year. It was to get my history credit out the way. So I was like, oh, it's a history class. I like history. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
And it was probably one of the most intensive courses I've ever taken.
Wow.
And it wasn't and I think it was more just because I didn't understand how intense the school is and how intense the curriculum is. So when we talked, Miss Yee, who was a teacher then, she's awesome, by the way, but she the way she taught, she was a very passionate teacher, but it was a lot. And she puts a lot. She's very detail oriented, and she explains historical concepts in such a way where you're almost there. But it's a lot of high level thinking that you just don't expect, like for a first class. So I ended up doing decent in that class, and I think everything went out fine. But that was my first taste. Like, wait, this is going to be a lot. And so freshman year rolled around, and it wasn't as great, for being honest. I just wasn't up to speed with how fast the classes went.
Yeah.
And, and some classes made a lot of sense. Other classes, biology, which I never thought I'd have to touch, that just were a lot. And you just don't understand how much it is at the first. For example, I was like, oh, for bio, the first unit you talk about is biochemistry, and which is a lot of digging into molecules itself,
Right.
how they work. And, that was just something that I remember was like, oh, this is a lot.
Right.
But I think over time,
Mhm.
even though I may not have been as well, that second half or second semester rather of that freshman year
Freshman year.
is when you kind of start piecing it together. It's like,
Mm.
oh, even though it's like, all right, even though I might not get an A in this class,
Yeah.
right? I'm going to try to see if I can do the best I can.
Mhm.
A great advice.
And so biology, I think I got to B plus. It was probably like a C at some point, but I got back to a B plus. And even though it wasn't an A, it was a still reminder like I can do this, right? It just we just had a little hiccup, and now we're back,
Yeah.
kind of on the
You
track.
just had
good.
to like adjust to it because
Exactly.
it wasn't something that you were used to.
And you kind of see the same
Yeah.
thing in college too,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
but I think it wasn't. So I remember like from my roommates as well. They were obviously like because you're in an entirely different place. You have and
Right.
it's kind of like a whole adjustment altogether.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that's the one thing about TJ. You've already gone through that experience once.
Yeah.
You've already
Mhm.
gone through that that bad semester.
Yeah.
And so
Gives
when you go
you-
to college, it's not necessarily that it's going to be like
Like as
it's not
yeah.
it's still going to be rigorous,
Right,
but
right.
not going to be as much to the
Mhm.
point where it's like, oh, like this is completely
Yeah.
new to me. You kind of get what's going on.
But
Yeah.
you basically use like what you learned from TJ,
Yes.
and then really use that to help you guide you through college. Like
Yep.
because of that one bad semester, you're like, I know what to expect from.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I expected from high school, and then now that I'm in college, like I obviously still have to
Yeah.
adapt
Yeah.
to my environment, all my different professors, and all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
But using your past experiences to really drive you to success in the future.
Right.
Yep, exactly.
Is like
No.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
heard that from my youngest son too. Stanford is like a piece of cake because I've gone through TJ. So that's a
Yeah.
good advice for
Yeah.
our listeners here. Now, TJ places a big emphasis on research. Every TJ student has to go through and then develop their own research in high school, which is somewhat like college or graduate thesis. Can you tell us about your research project?
Yeah. So research itself was that was the biggest part of TJ, as you mentioned, and I think it just got more and more intense every year you went up. So as I mentioned, the first year, your freshman year, we did the iBest project, and that was a paper. You were in groups of 4. You had to do a paper. I think it's now called iBest because they include statistics in it. But it's a huge interdisciplinary project that they have, where your biology, your English, and your design and tech teachers all work together, and you're working as a group of 4 in the same project.
The first time that you collaborate.
Yep,
with
exactly.
them.
And
Real world.
and and that was the first research project. Ours was on salamanders, I remember, and it was about how dissolved oxygen affects salamander larvae population.
Oh wow!
So
that's what I'm teaching with my academies of Cloud and Sacramento. Yeah.
yeah, and it is really like one of those things you think about. It's like I
Yeah.
really like did that because we would actually like freezing winter go to ponds where they were like stratified 6x6 cells, and we would actually go in with like heavy rain boots and actually count them,
Wow.
which I think was which is one of those things where you realize, oh, I actually did that, and
Yeah.
you were actually on the field, which is now the boots did not help whatsoever, so I was pretty mad the rest of the day, and so just my legs up till here were just absolutely soaked, which is no fun. But it's just one of those things where you realize, oh, you were actually out on the field like the first year itself, and that's kind of what the magic of TJ and why it's so special. And you kind of have those research projects through and through to the point where it's like, oh, it becomes a little bit more and more intense. And then so for that senior year,
Yeah. Senior year.
that's the big
You're
research
on your
project.
own, right?
You're on your own. It's your own research project. Now, for me, it was a little different because I got a mentorship.
Oh,
with-
so you avail of the mentorship.
So,
Okay. So talk
for
about it.
So the mentorship, I was able to work with Dr. Patrick Gillivet at GMU, and it was about how to use like data analysis tools to measure, to measure microbiome analysis.
Oh
So-
my gosh! Wow.
So, and that was an unreal experience as well. And so, and that I kind of just helped him on the project as well, and helped him through the samples to kind of understand how to use technologies. And I learned through him. He's absolutely one of the smartest people I've ever met, especially in his field. And learning through him was an absolute joy. But I think the one thing I take away from that is how technologies are used in research projects, how it's a constantly evolving subject. So, for example, I learned about this thing called the MinION, which is a special device where you essentially take a sample and it essentially reads the proteins for you, like just on the spot. Now it takes a little bit of time. I think it's like a 2.5, 3 hour delay. But I remember I was so invested in that small device. I think I wrote like an entire section about that on my project and I presented it. Yeah. But, and it also interfaces with the Orange tool. So, which was one of those, which is was used like for allowing you to use data analyses and and it was actually used like, measure the protein levels itself.
Yeah.
And so things like that was kind of I would say my first step into like the real world and how, it all interfaces out, because you understand, I knew from biology, like how the microbiomes work and kind of like the inner workings of it. But you always like say, all right, what does it look like in the real world? Right. Because it's not like like they actually figured it out and they actually like have done studies to do this. And this just being in the part of one was an absolute experience.
Yeah.
Breathtaking experience.
It's like you learn about the thing, but when you actually like have the hands-on experience, and
absolutely.
you get to go out in the field, it's like you also just have a joy when learning when you do that instead of just like reading books and things.
Yeah,
like that.
even for the research project, it's not like even for the research project too. I mean, I have a lot of friends who did that as well. But for that one, it's the same thing too. I guess it's not as involved because for that one you stayed on school. That one I had to actually drive to like GMU, like in Fairfax, which my dad hated because I didn't have my driver's license then. At the time, and so it was like, all right, and I'm a May birthday, so it was up until May where my dad had to basically be with me while I'm driving, which is like the most stressful thing ever because he, when learning when I drive with my dad, it's it's maybe be a better driver whatsoever, but he'd tell me like he'd nitpick me in the worst places possible every time I drive, and it's just obviously to make it better, and also just because he's on the side, and that's just kind of how he is. But that's just something funny that I remember from that experience. But I think just like the experience of just going to an actual university and actually conducting research is an unparalleled experience.
There you go. That's good to hear for our aspiring TJ students. And then before we leave TJ and before we move on to the third segment, I wanted to ask you, what were some of the standout moments that you cherish most from your time at TJ?
It's getting to know the people. And I think, if you talk to any students, like they're probably going to say, oh, it's the science and the math. And I'll probably tell you it's getting to know the people because those
relationships. Relationships.
And I think it's so, my iBest, we're very close when we had a lot of things together. We had a laser tag party that we all organized at the end of the year. And we just stuck close ever since. And, we, even after that, 9th grade, 10th grade, we have hum groups. Now 10th grade was a little different. 11th grade was a little different because junior year, because it was COVID year. So, so we knew each other like beforehand, but just we weren't actually like in the classroom, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But but that sophomore year, we just one big family almost. I guess I'd say. So, and I think it's weird because now my younger brother Sean, who goes to TJ.
I know.
I came back from college and I had to drive him because
to TJ.
Yeah.
To TJ, but they did the same thing too, where we had a laser tag party. They went to Tyson's and
they have pajama. Oh gosh, a lot.
Yeah, so they went to Tyson's and I had to drive like 3 of them, like as a carpool.
That's funny.
Yeah, and so I remember my dad. I made my dad do it. And now my brother asked me to do it. I was like, all right, I think it's a rite of passage.
That is so nice. That's a great experience.
Yeah.
So so nice.
Yeah. Do you still like keep in contact with like your teachers or your
my teachers?
friends?
I think not as much as I should have, which you definitely should because they're incredible people over there.
Yeah,
but
Mr.
Billington.
Yeah, he was your teacher. He was with us at Young Scholars.
Yep, he taught me. Yeah, so for TJ Prep, actually, he was the major teacher. He was awesome. He was very calm.
He's teaching.
Yeah, he was a very calm teacher, and the way he taught was very interesting, which is almost slow. And, I'm like a very frenetic guy when it comes to like math or something. And so I'm like, and I just was like, all right, I want to keep solving. I want to keep solving. I want to keep solving.
Yeah.
So him being a change of pace was kind of like a weird experience because I'm not.
I wish I could
no, I'm
get him into a podcast with us.
Yeah.
Mr. Billington.
No, and so, and you know, I think that kind of that thing of slowing it down
Yeah.
and kind of thinking about it,
Yeah.
that's kind of like what I took a lot from this class.
Oh, he thinks highly of you, Mr.
Yeah.
Billington.
Oh,
He thinks highly of you,
oh, he
Dr.
was great.
Scribner. Yeah.
He was great, yeah.
Yeah.
Dr. Scribner too, yeah. But, you know, I think, you know, experiences like that are what, I think those experiences, just like connections with your teachers, connections with, you know, the students that you had,
It's the relationship.
those are the things that matter. And those are
Exactly.
the things that matter a lot.
I
And I think when I look back at teacher, that's the thing that I remember.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah, and then to think about it, relationships matter. That's the first thing. Yeah, you know, like a relationship with Christ first, and then your family relationship, your marriage,
Mhm.
and then all the way to work. Relationship is the single thing, most single
Absolutely,
thing,
yep.
most important thing is in this world. Okay, transitioning to college.
Mhm.
Okay, now that you're in college, how has your perspective on STEM and education evolved?
So there's a lot more freedom. And I think that's the biggest thing with any not even just out in STEM, but outside STEM, you find that there's a lot of freedom in what you do.
In college?
So in college, yep. So you know, there's a lot more access to resources that you see
Right.
because it's a bigger campus. There's a lot you have the ability, your class are more sparsed out, so you have a lot more time to stay on campus and see what else they have. You can even go to, if you want to, you can go to another class. If you don't, you don't even have to be attended, but sometimes I'll go to my class, another class, say, this looks interesting.
Like to sit on it?
Yeah, it's
Oh,
like
okay.
if I want to do this
Listen.
next
Nice.
semester, let me go to this class, see what's going
Oh,
on.
just check it out.
Yeah.
That's
I-
nice.
Yeah, I almost went when they had a test. I did not know. I almost went when they had a test, and I thankfully emailed them beforehand. He's like, "Do
Yeah.
not come. We're having a test. Come, you can come next week." So, you know, but you know that kind of freedom. That's kind of what is the big difference between TJ and college. 'Cause even though TJ does give you a lot of liberties, because you know it's probably one of the better college prep schools
Right.
that high schools can have. It's still high school in the end, right?
Right.
You still have your set periods. You do have electives, but the set period 8 to 4. Right. With college, you realize, you know, I don't have to take 7 classes a day or 4 classes a day.
Yeah.
It can be 2 classes a day spread out throughout the day. It could be 1 at 8 a.m. It could be 1 at 6 p.m.
Right.
Right. And also it's not an hour and a half like it is for every class, or 45 minutes on an anchor day like it is at TJ. It got to be 50 minutes, at least for Pitt, at least for me. It got to be 50 minutes Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It could be Tuesday, Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, an hour and 15.
Yeah.
Or it could be, you know, 2 hour, 30 minutes, where it's just once a week.
Okay.
Right. So, you know, that kind of flexibility is just something that kind of throws you off. It's like, oh my God, I have so much control over this.
Yeah.
And now, you know, but, you know, as a STEM thing, that there's also 2 ways to this. So, you know, if you enjoy these liberties, you know, you obviously, you know, you can have a lot more fun. It's a lot more relaxation. But there's also does give you the time to say, all right, I want, if you're more ambitious, you can say, oh, I have an ungodly amount of resources right here.
Right.
And I have access to it, and I have the time to access it. Which you may not have that time because, you know, if you live in Loudoun, the commute from Loudoun to TJ is an hour
Right.
and 15. And then barring if you don't have any after school activities afterwards, it's the bus ride straight back is another hour or an hour 15.
Yeah.
So
Something
it's
to think
really
about. Yeah.
so you really don't have a lot of time in the day when you think about it. And now, you know, obviously, you know, there are ways you can still work around that. But when you are you know, and with TJ, you know, you do end up doing all those activities in clubs that you have to make it a fulfilling experience. But with college, you realize, I have so much time, and it's a matter of how you use it. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from, you know, college. Like, there's a lot of time, but it all depends on how you can use it,
Right.
which is kind of like that gift and curse that comes with that freedom. Yep.
That's good. Anything that you wanted to ask him? Wanted to add? I was wondering, I know you've partially talked about it, but what lessons or skills from TJ or, you know, from your early years that you took to college? And I think you had already talked about, you know, lessons from the Masterpiece Academy, so Young Scholars Circle.
Yeah. So I guess one of the biggest lessons is time management. And you know, coming into TJ, that was probably one of my biggest weaknesses, where I just, you know, it wasn't that, you know, I couldn't like manage my time well, but it's like maybe there are better ways of doing it that I just didn't think about. And, you know, like there are definitely better ways of, doing an assignment instead of staying up to like 2 a.m. in the morning.
No, yeah.
Yeah. That's with any college or any high school, not even just TJ. It's any high school experience.
I remember that.
But, that's kind of that understanding, how you can be a lot more productive with your time and kind of gaining that freedom. It's like gaining that freedom, saying, hey, I have this time, but I know I can use it well. So what can I do with this other time right here? And it kind of builds on top of it. So by the time you go to college, you are looking for opportunities to say, hey, I can do this here, I can do this here, I can do this here. Yeah. And you're already used to it because of TJ.
It's really good.
So time management, I think, is something that I carry a lot, just outside the skills itself that you learn from TJ. Like do the math. Like obviously, the actual learning done carries throughout. It's going to carry out through the rest of your life. That's how good of a school that it really was. But I think that time management and also I guess relationships as well, as you touched on.
Yeah,
that.
like how to collaborate.
Yeah, exactly.
You're talking about how collaboration.
Right? How to collaborate. I think help being on team projects for a whole year is something that
TJ is huge on collaboration.
Oh yeah, and that's something that carries out through college. Absolutely. Like not even just like academically, but when you got to find a roommate, right? You have to meet with people.
Right.
Yeah. And you don't think about it, but it's like I'm using like what I learned from TJ almost everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So that collaboration that we teach in elementary school to middle school to high school really matters.
Yeah.
Right?
I agree.
Yeah. So let's move on to the fourth segment, from learner to mentor. So as you all know, Kunal is now a mentor, a teacher, a STEM facilitator and math facilitator here, teacher here at the Masterpiece Academy, giving back. So you've come full circle, returning to the Masterpiece Academy as a STEM or math facilitator. What inspired you to take on this role? And how does it feel now to be a mentor to students who are walking the same path you once walked?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I love problem solving. I mean, that's probably why I'm in the computer science field, because I just love finding problem solving it. And that's any STEM major too. Now, the biggest joy you have in anything that you do is learning. And I think that's why I remember fondly, on those years of, of that year when I was studying for TJ, not just because, of all the relations of what I had, but I was learning. And, the more you learn, the more you understand, the more you realize what you can do with it. Knowledge is power. That's my dad's like constant saying throughout. But, and,
goes back.
And always having my parents has been great because, you always want to do that, but you always need that push. You always need someone to kind of like say, oh, what if you try this? And you just take it on entirely. And so I think when I thought about it, going back to it's like, I want to give other students that push, right? Because there are there are so many talented students that I've taught, even like, so even before.
You did Roblox.
I did the Roblox. I did the Roblox.
IAT with us.
IAT. I've done it twice. And I think every student I've taught has been incredibly talented and incredibly hardworking. And it's been a joy to teach them. But every single time, I think it's the way that they understand. It's the way the more I teach them, the more I understand there's so much more than they give themselves credit for. And I think that's kind of what carries me through. It's like, if I give one person this motivation or this chance to, go on with what he or she has, then, I feel like that's like the most rewarding experience I can get.
Very good. That's very insightful. Did you see how when he talks, he goes back to, to his dad, to his mom, and then, to his mentor way back in GMU, to his mentors in Young Scholars at the Masterpiece Academy, and at TJ. So that's how influential educators are and teachers are in the lives of students. And now he's giving back. He is now part of the STEM leader workforce. So so how has your experience as a student shaped the way you mentor and teach others?
So, as a student, you kind of, you realize that some teachers, some of them work, some of them don't. Right? No, and I think, like, those are honest conversations you have that, like, you go to a class, maybe this teacher isn't for me. Even in college, too. It's like, oh, maybe this teacher, he might be a good teacher, but maybe his style of teaching isn't for me.
All right.
And, as a teacher, I think, as I taught those classes, one thing I realized is that, not everyone's going to like the way I teach, right? And I think that's just something that, especially when you have like a large audience of students, you can't, like, we have lecture halls like for economics classes at Pitt that are like 90 students. Not every single student's going to be happy the way you teach,
Right.
but I think the way that but you want to try to do your best, and you want to try to be as helpful as you can to any student that you have. And I think understanding too that, you know, like, oh, you know, you can't help everybody is something that's still that kind of like pushes me to say I want to do the best I can. And that's kind of the lesson that you draw from being a student, that, you know, your experiences with teachers, then, you know, maybe you didn't understand something as well, or maybe, you know, this didn't work as well. Kind of picking up on that and those small things that you learn kind of helps you become a better teacher and saying, okay, let me try this out. Let's see if maybe this works. I know I struggle with it. Because, you know, like I did an essay, I did the IAT, and you know, sometimes, you know, sometimes the students who I teach will give better ways of solving problems than I do. And so, you know, things like that are kind of where you look back and say, this is where I kind of struggled as a kid, but he gets it. Like, he's not going through the same thing I'm going through.
Right.
And so when you understand that from a student's perspective, that, oh, you know, there's another way of solving that you don't connect with your student with, and there's a connection between student and teacher that you don't realize as a student, that's kind of what gives me a better perspective of why teaching matters and why I want to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
That's very insightful. Yeah, isn't it? Very mature. Yeah. So, what do you find most rewarding about this role? And is there a particular success story or experience with a student that stands out to you?
The money. No, I'm kidding. So no,
Because we pay a lot.
no. So I think the way I learned was through my parents, and I think, you know, that's
Yes.
I think just and it's more an honor to them. Just the way they taught was a way that, you know, I didn't expect, you know, to work out. Like, not that I didn't expect it to work out, but the fact that, you know, the fact that carries on to this day is just and the way that their habits, the way they coach me up,
Right.
and those things, those carry through to the rest of my day, and I guess for the rest of my life. So that's just something that you know, as like when you think about it, it's like, oh, you know, of course that's how they raise you, but you don't realize it when you're going, you know, when during that time period, especially like during high school, right? So, you know, when I come back to teaching in this sense, that's kind of where my that's just kind of where my headspace is usually with that. And yeah, so, you know, when you think about it, so
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is that reminds me of Dr. Dennis and Barbara Rainey's book, The Art of Parenting. Everything boils down to the family.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
they call it the university of family. You know, so if your family ties is strong, and that goes, you know, that impacts your learning and the way you relate and you do things later in life.
Yeah.
So that's
agree.
the value of having a tight marriage and then tight family ties.
I agree. Absolutely, I agree.
Yeah. So if you could go back and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
Loosen up. And I really do mean this, because you know, when you I've gone, so I've throughout ever since, you know, like I started with the SCAT, you kind of, your milestones are kind of tests, right? Oh, did I pass this achievement? Did I pass this? Did I do well in this test? Did I get in this club? Did I do well
And
in this
like check the
competition?
box.
Right. And you know, it's fun, right? Because you know, it's like, oh, it's competition. And you know, as a student, like, you want to do more. You want to compete and say, oh, I'm like
Better than
this
other,
in a selfish way, yeah. But I think what you kind of miss out, or like those, especially when you get to college, is that you can breathe. Like, you do have moments where you can kind of breathe in and kind of relax and enjoy yourself.
Every season.
And I think, you know, when you kind of get that opportunity to rejuvenate, it gives you more of an energy. And where it's kind of this weird thing where if you kind of have this ability to relax, you do a lot better.
Right.
And you don't realize it, that we're essentially, you know, like, oh, I'm doing this competition. Math counts was one. Math counts, AMC that era, and AMC 10, and AMC 12. That, like, math era, it was just constantly like, oh, study for this competition, study for this competition, study for this competition. And, you know, you have a great time, But I think you also kind of want, if you look back and you kind of take that small break and you kind of look back at what you've done, and that's kind of where you kind of get more confidence in yourself. Because, you know, you're going to have your days. You're going to have your bad days where, you know, you're studying for that. And, you know, like, let's say you have an AMC 8, it's 25 problems, and it's one day you just get 15 right. Right? And
not all of them are good.
Yeah. And it's just like, it's a momentum thing, really is. That's the one thing you learn, especially in this condensed period of time where there's so much. Momentum carries through. So, you know, if you have a bad test, you know, sometimes that'll just carry through, right? Or if you didn't do as well on, you know, a writing assignment as you thought you did, that kind of can carry through. But you have to learn how to kind of have that short-term memory and loosen up, where it's like, oh, you know, it happened. And, you know, with college, you kind of get that breathing space where you kind of think about that and kind of look back and say, oh, I've done all this to this point, and one test is going to knock me over. No. So that's kind of the advice I'd give to myself. Because in TJ, you're going to get a C. I don't care how good of a student you are, you will get a C in TJ. And so, but it's always that
reality check.
Yeah, but it always is, you always go back and say, you know, it's just one grade, right? It doesn't define who I am, doesn't define, you know, what I can do. And you just got to keep going through. You just keep pushing it.
Oh, thank you. There you go. Now, one more piece of advice for our aspiring TJ students who are probably listening right now. I'm going to write about this in our blog. What advice would you give to our aspiring TJ students and who are now at TJ, kind of like your brother, Ishan?
The advice I'd give all these students, and especially Ishan, listen to your parents. And
yes.
Because
that's good.
And this shouldn't just be a TJ thing. This should be for any student there.
Anybody.
But so during junior year, especially because it was COVID for us, you know, you were at home, but it was probably the most stressful year of your life because it was AP Physics, AP Chem, AP not AP Bio. I took that last year, but AP Physics, AP Chem, AP Push, and
it's a lot of APs.
Yeah, and I think it was AP. It was one AP Lit, so it was 4 APs in that year, and you know you don't realize it, but it takes a toll, right? You know, especially when you're at home, it's so easy where you're not moving around, where you just kind of lose yourself, and so you kind of want to have your parents as a bedrock in the sense that you don't really understand that, you know, how like having them push you, having you kind of course correct is going to help you a lot. Because like, you know, that junior year was, even though, you know, it all ended out fine, you know, I did well.
Yeah, that's the hardest one in TJ.
Yeah, but you know, it really was not fun whatsoever. And, you know, obviously it doesn't help that, you know, you're at home, you couldn't talk to people. And so you're just in your room, like you're in your room for 9 months doing school. And that's just not going to be a great time every single time. And, you know, what my parents did was that, and sometimes, you know, like when you feel like, oh, I can work late, you get a nibble, you want to eat something as you go through. And my mom, I remember she told me like, Kunal, you're eating 4 meals a day. Like you're stress eating pretty much. So she like curtailed it. And, you know, obviously it was like, all right, I'm studying. Why?
Mom's instinct.
Right. And, you know, it definitely, after that, it got a lot better and it got a lot smoother, especially like during the exam season, which was surprisingly not as stressful as I thought it would be. So, you know, things like that are where you have to listen to your parents because they know what's best. Just not even though they might not study with you, they understand who you are and understand how you work. And they understand, you know, if there's something wrong, they're going to be there for you.
Yeah. Yep. Perfect.
So, and I guess like for any other technical advice, I'd say is make relationships. That's something that carries on through college. Right. You want to get on the ground running where you kind of meet people and you're active and you know you understand, you know, who you are. Now it doesn't have to be like you have to be the most popular kid in school, but if you know how to meet people and how to entertain them in the sense that work with them, you can work with them. Exactly. That's the biggest skill I can give for you, especially in such a collaborative school like TJ. Like I think one example I think about is with Ishan, because when he does drama, I wasn't here for this, but my mom told me. So they have 1 act for drama, and where it's about like 15, 20 plays, all 2-minute plays. But what really captured me was that they're all student written and directed.
Wow.
Which I heard, it's like, that's insane. I did not that. And so, And
TJ kids.
I wish I didn't. I wish I
awesome.
didn't miss that. But it's always like those interactions where
Yeah.
if you all work together, you will come up with something amazing.
Yeah.
Especially with a school with gifted students like those, including yours. Yep.
Yeah.
But
Perfect.
yeah. So I think those. If there was some advice, that's the advice I would absolutely give.
Perfect. Now, one last thing about you are now in sophomore college, second year college, third year,
Third year, junior.
third year, junior. Yeah. So talk about your internship and your future STEM career,
So
and then maybe what advice would you give to aspiring STEM leader like you, because you're now two more years, and you're now a STEM leader.
yeah. That just feels weird to hear. But so I guess like the one thing I'd say would be let's see, what's a good way to put this? That's a good question. Let's see. I guess the one way I would put it would be what can you say the question again? I just lost my train of thought.
Oh yeah, basically talk about like your future, like your
Right,
internship,
right, I'm
like
sorry,
your
yeah.
work, your STEM work.
Yeah. So right now I'm doing a part-time job with a healthcare company, and we're doing a telehealth thing where
that's a good
it's where we're kind of trying to connect through a big cloud system remote veterans who aren't as accessible to hospitals or other healthcare options. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. But it's been a great experience so far. I'm still working with them part-time, but I think the biggest thing I can ask, especially for like a computer science student myself, is internships are not an easy thing to get. Like you think, you go to college, you're gonna get an internship, you're gonna get a job, which you will, but you have to put in a lot of work. I think that's the first thing. There's a computer science club at Pitt when I went freshman year, and the first thing they said is that you're not gonna get your dream job year one, or maybe not even year three, because it's such a saturated market because everyone wants this internship, and everyone wants to go to Amazon, Microsoft, Google, but I think over time you learn, this is like you have to kind of put in the work and you have to kind of start small. And so actually this is a very interesting story. So I got that internship job I was talking about because I taught an IAT class, and one of the students' fathers, Mr. Sabatine, he kind of said, I'm working on this project, and if you want to join, I can definitely try.
Awesome.
So you have no idea where opportunities may come,
Right. Yeah.
right? So, and it's always just leveraging when they arrive. That's the one thing I can give like as advice as well.
Network.
And but in the end, the future of all this is you want to keep learning, right? Even beyond, once I'm done with with my bachelor's, it's all right. Let's see if there's anything more I can learn, right? Maybe through a master's, maybe doing another course, maybe even doing a project, right? A big project, because that's doing hands-on things is always the best way to learn. So, there are a lot of avenues for how this will go, but I know that in the end, the best thing I want to do is keep learning, right? Whatever field it may be. So, computer science, maybe doing a big project with AI down the road, maybe even just going straight to my master's, right? And I think that's the flexibility that comes when you grow up, so that you have a lot of options. But always pick the option where you feel like you learn the most or you have the most to gain. So that's where I would probably say, like as some sort of inspiration, that when you look at the future and you say, I want to be a doctor, I want to be this, and you feel like you have it all planned out, just hold off on that a minute, because the idea of you going to college is for you to learn, understand, what new technology is there, what are the new devices there, how you can learn, how you can use resources as well, and that's just something that through 4 years changes your perspective. At least 4 years will change your perspective. So that's probably my advice I'd give for that.
Thank you so much. Now, are there any piece of advice that you could, that we haven't covered in our conversation that you could give to young learners from fifth graders, all the way to TJ, and then the people who are applying for, any young learners?
Yeah. So
Something
learning is not something that comes right easy off the bat. I mean, it's a process. It really is. Where it's to the point that, you kind of expect that, I learned this, I kind of gained a step, but there's so much learned that you don't realize. there's a curve that I keep seeing where when you're studying for something, you start right here at the, kind of like where it's like, oh, I kind of know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
The more you learn, the more it kind of dips down. It's like, oh my God, there's so much I have to learn. But then it shoots back up, because once you get to that low point, it's just endless possibilities. Because that's that climactic point where you realize, oh, I know some about this, but there's so much, but I understand the bedrock of it, and like you just keep expanding. Yeah. And so learning is a process, no matter what subject, STEM or outside STEM that you may encounter. That's what will always that curve's always going to be there for any subject that you have. So it's just understanding that it's a process. But if you're dedicated, you keep at it, and you push through that climactic point that I'm talking about, you're gonna go places. You don't be it through TJ, maybe not even through TJ, maybe through another avenue entirely. If you're dedicated to learning, you will go places. And I think that's the best advice I can probably give to anybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that insight. And I love the piece of advice that you give to our learners. Value the family. That family value is still
important.
That is still very vital. And then relationships. And that ties up with education, right? In coaching, it ties up with, it's basically the core of education. You've got to have good relationship. So to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. And if you like this episode, visit our website, subscribe, and visit our website, www.masterpiecek12.org, and be sure to subscribe. Stay tuned until our next episode. Bye for now.